friends. How are you all doing? Welcome to the series, the third part of the series of how to stop fighting with your son. Let's just recap. In the first two episodes, I talked about the two concepts that are essential for us to understand and kind of adopt in our life in order to stop fighting with our son or just to have a really good relationship with him. So the first concept is that our relationship with our son is not something outside of us. It's not what we do with our son. It's not what our son tells us. It's not what he does. It's not what we do together. It's not what I say to him. It's none of that. The relationship, the definition of the relationship with our son is our thoughts, our stories we think about our son. Okay, that's how we will experience our relationship with our boy, is what we're thinking about him. Okay, so that's number one. The second concept that I talked about in the second part was that our feelings are not created by our son. It's not, what he does doesn't make us mad. What he says doesn't make us upset. It's not coming from him, it's coming from our thoughts. Okay, so these two concepts, I want you to keep them in mind as I talk about examples today. And today I'm going to talk about different thoughts that will cause you to fight with your son so that you can be aware, understand what's causing the fight in the first place, right? Once we understand what's causing the fight in the first place, then we can take ownership of that and realize, we are creating that on our end. And then from that understanding, we can choose to stop it if we want to, right? But before we take ownership of it, we cannot stop, right? And I want to be clear. When I say stop fighting with your son, I am talking about you taking your part in the fight with your son, right? It takes two people to fight. If your son can be fighting with you, but if you are not fighting back with him, there is no fight. There is connection. There is agreement. So yes, I am talking that what you can do so that you stop fighting with him. Because we cannot control what he does. We can't control what he says. We can't make him stop fighting with you, right? This is his business, none of your business. But I am here to help you, and I am here to help you feel better about your son and connect with him, love him instead of fighting him, okay? So today, I will talk about different examples of thoughts that you will have that will create a feeling for you. And from that feeling, you are fighting with your son, okay? So I categorized these thoughts into 4 different categories, and I will tell you them right now. So the first category that is so common for a lot of people is this category. I labeled it fighting reality about your son. That means you want your son to be different. Okay, so if you have a thought that any thought that will fall under this category, then that thought will create a feeling of any feeling that will drive fighting. So I'll give you some examples. So if you are not accepting, you're fighting the reality of your son, you might want him to be happy. You're like, he's not happy enough. And this is the most common, the most poisonous thought we can have about our son that may lead to a fight, may lead to an argument, may lead to you nagging him, may lead to you showing up in a way that's annoying, that's fighting him, right? So even though you do want him to be happy, what you're basically saying is, I don't think he's happy enough, which is you judging him, which is, in other words, you fighting what's real for your son right now. Let's say he's not happy, or in your opinion, he's not happy, right? And if you're fighting that reality, basically you're not accepting it. You're like, no, this is not good enough. I think he should be happy. Then you are going to create frustration for yourself in your body, either frustration or anger or pissed off or worried or scared, annoyed, any of these feelings, disappointment, unsatisfaction. Then from that feeling, how are you going to show up to him, with him? And my guess is you're not going to be trusting that he's got it. You're not going to be loving. You're not going to be curious. You're not going to be connecting with him. You're not going to be as supportive as you can be because you think he should be happier. You think something's gone wrong and you're going to tell him, you should do this, right? And that is an example of how if we have a thought like he should be happier, I just want him to be happy. But it has us showing up in a way that has us fighting with him. Okay, so it's called a thinking cycle. We have a thought that creates a feeling for us, and from that feeling, we fight with our son. So any thought that you have about your son, that you want him to be different, you want him to do something, you want him to stop doing something, you want him to call more, you want him to rest more, you want him to play less video games, you want him to get better grades, you want him to care more, you want him to have good friends, you want him to get married, you want him to have kids, you want him to settle down, you want him to grow up, you want him to pick up his socks, right? Any of these things that you are wanting him to do, it's because you are not accepting the reality of what's going on, which will create frustration. You're like, I want this to be happening, but I feel like it's not happening and I feel frustrated, right? So notice how not accepting what's going on for your son will make you feel. Notice the feeling. I may be wrong about how you're feeling, but I know that the action of fighting with your son comes from some feeling. What is that feeling for you? For me, it's usually some sort of frustration, some flavor of that, right? Unsatisfaction, anger, something like that, right? And so that's what's causing the fight, not your son, right? We think it's our son. We think it's what he's doing. We think it's how he's not doing something. If he was doing something better, then we would feel better. No, that's not the case. It's our thought about what he's doing, right? So that's first category. Not agreeing with what he's doing, judging it, fighting the reality of your son's life. Okay, so any thoughts you have about your son and how he should be doing it better, differently, put it in that first category and then see what feeling that creates for you, because that feeling will determine whether you're loving your son actively, right? If you're supporting him, or if you're fighting him actively, right? Or if you're withholding love, right? That feeling is very important because it will determine how you show up. It will not determine what your son does. We can't change what he's doing. We've tried, right? So remember, it's not what your son's doing. It's what you're thinking about what he's doing. Okay? And if your thoughts are not, I like what he's doing, or I support him, or I love him, or how can I support him better? If they're not thoughts like that, then you're not allowing yourself to love him and connect with him as much as you want. Then you are contributing to the fight. You're the one causing the fight. You're fighting the reality, right? So that's the first category, fighting the reality of your son. Then there's another category, is fighting the reality of you as a mom. And I did not write down a lot of examples for this because it's a general topic for this is like, I'm not a good mom. There's a lot of different thoughts that you can have that are like that same theme, like I'm a terrible mom, or I am doing something wrong. If I was doing something right, he would be doing that. So just in general, if you have judgment of yourself as his mom, then you will create feelings for yourself like shame, again, frustration, like you're frustrated, like about yourself. You're thinking, if I only showed up differently, then our relationship would be different. He would talk to me more. He would call me more. He would not be so angry, or he would be doing better at school, or he would have a better relationship with girls, whatever it is. If you're blaming it on yourself, that's going to show up in your relationship with your son, probably not in a way that you want, right? Just like the same way that you show up if you're frustrated about him, the same thing happens if you're frustrated about you. That will show up in your actions with him, right? For example, if you think I'm a terrible mom for yelling at my son, you might feel shame and then beat yourself up. That shame will have you like kind of close up, feel bad about yourself, and feel frustrated. And then what are you likely to do when you are feeling ashamed, terrible about yourself, and closed up and beating yourself? You're more likely to express that frustration when you're with your son, right? So you might yell, right? So if you yell at him because you're feeling frustrated and shameful, then you're just going to prove to yourself that I'm a terrible mom. Okay, and that's just one example of how how our opinion of ourselves as a mom will affect how we are with our boy, right? So any judgment that you have about yourself as a mom, categorize it in this second category is fighting the reality of who you are being as a mom. Okay, if you were not judging yourself as how you're being as a mom, if you were thinking thoughts like, I'm a good mom, I'm doing best I can, I love my boy, right? I'm doing a good job. Those thoughts would produce feelings for you like love, acceptance, compassion, maybe pride. And from those feelings, very important for us to recognize that these feelings are what is driving our actions when we are with our son. So these feelings would have you show up with your son in a more loving way, in a more open way, in a more curious way, right? If you are feeling at peace about yourself, then you are a lot likely to provide support and love and connection to your son, right? So now we have two categories: fighting the reality of your son, judging your son, wishing he was different, and then the second thing with yourself, fighting the reality of you, wishing you were a different mom, judging yourself as a mom. And both of these thoughts that would go into these categories will create feelings that will create fights. Okay, so our thinking cycle is our thoughts about our son or ourselves will create emotion in your body that will create you fighting with your son. Okay, so I'm just going to keep repeating that because that is the way you can have the power back in your relationship so that you can stop fighting. Okay, so that you don't need your son to change to feel better. So the third category is fighting the reality of the outside world. For example, if my son's dad would spend more time with him, then my son would behave better, and then we would have a better relationship. So now you're blaming the outside world and thinking that if the outside world would change, then your relationship with your son would be different. So notice how we have a theme here. We have a theme of fighting the reality. You're either fighting the reality of your son, how your son is. You're either fighting of the reality of you, how you are as a mom, as a person, or you're fighting the reality of the external world, everything outside of that. And any sort of fighting will create feelings that drive you actions of fighting, right? So if you're thinking like, oh, if he could go to, if teachers at school would treat him differently, and then he would feel happier and he would then, talk to me more, right? I'm just making this stuff up. But do you see how if you're thinking that something outside of your control or outside of your son's control, if that was different, then things would be better. Again, it's not the outside world that creates your feelings or your son's feelings. It's your thoughts. It's your thoughts about those things, right? If you were thinking thoughts about, say, the father, like, I am so blessed to have, the father spend time with my boy, any amount that he does, like, feel how differently that feels, then I wish he would spend more time with him, right? If you had different thoughts, like, I love that my son has a father in his life. I love that my son is going to school. I love that my son has different teachers in his life because they're all going to bring him something different to learn. Notice if you were thinking these thoughts, how more empowered you would feel and how much better you would feel. And if you're feeling good about those things, how are you going to show up in your relationship with your son? Right? You're probably going to allow yourself to feel more love and connection with your son if you are thinking these thoughts, right? So again, notice how your thoughts about kind of the external world can either bring you closer to your boy or can create more of that fighting with your son. Okay? And the last category that I wrote down here is thoughts about the past or the future. And I know this is so specific, but I've noticed this is very specific to us moms, because we are always thinking about the future of our boys, but we're also always thinking about the past and how we showed up with our boy in the past and how our son used to behave in the past. Right? And so if we are thinking, we tend to worry, right? We have all these like super default thoughts about the future of our son and how it's going to turn out, whether he's going to be successful, is he going to have these same problems he has now in the future, all of these things. So any thoughts that you have about the past and the future, what kind of feelings are they creating for you? This is a really good test. Like, how can we test if they're creating feelings of peace and comfort or excitement? Are they producing good results in your life, these feelings? Or are you feeling worried, right? When we think about the future, we might feel worried, scared, anxious. And when we're feeling that way, how are we going to talk to our boy? Are we going to be trying to control everything he's doing, everything we're doing? Or are we going to be more trusting and loving and accepting, right? So any thoughts that have something to do about the past, and the past will be thoughts of, I should have done this differently. That feels terrible, right? If I've done this differently, then he wouldn't be behaving this way. That feels so terrible, because if you're thinking that and you can't change the past, then you're doomed. You're screwed, right? So if you're feeling kind of guilt, that has something to do maybe with the past. If you're thinking about something about the future, that will look like a sense of worry or fear or anxiety or doom or dread, right? I want you to really pay attention. Whenever you're thinking about your son and your relationship with him, which the thoughts that you're having, which category will it fall into? These 4 categories. Will it fall into the first category, fighting with your son, the reality of your son, wishing him to be different? Or is it the thoughts about you, wishing that you were different? Or is it thoughts about wishing that the external world would be different? Or is it going to be thoughts about the past, wishing the past was different? Or is it going to be thoughts about the future, being like worried about the future? You kind of wishing that the future was different, right? You're like, oh, if he's having these problems now, then he will have these problems in the future for the rest of his life. So you're almost now deciding that the future will be terrible and you wish the future would change. So notice how these thoughts, any of your thoughts will fall into any of these 4 categories. And these thoughts will like produce feelings, and the feelings are fuel for how you are with your son, what you say to your son. Whatever you're feeling will always fuel what you're saying to him or what you're not saying. If you're withdrawn, right? If you're anxious and worried and feeling guilty, then you might withdraw from him, which will withdraw the love you could be feeling from yourself and from him, right? So notice that. This is your first job before we change anything, is for you to be aware of what is creating the fighting. And it's always your thinking and your feeling. Your thoughts will create your feelings, and your feelings are the fuel for the fighting, okay? So now that you have a little bit more understanding of what's creating the fighting, I want you to be super gentle with yourself and not judge yourself. You're only a human mom. You're not a superhuman who is a robot, who's not thinking negative thoughts and who's always doing the right thing. So just be patient and look at this as an experiment and start paying attention to what you're thinking. If it helps for you to write down your thoughts, I highly recommend it. In fact, I do that. It helps me look at them. It helps me evaluate them. I write them down. And if I want it to be faster to look at them, I write them down on my phone. I just type them up because I'm not always on my computer and I don't always have a piece of paper. But my phone's always with me. So I just open up notes and I just start dumping everything I'm thinking in my phone. And then I can look, oh, these are the thoughts that are creating my feelings. Well, no wonder I'm fighting with whoever, right? I must say it's not happening as much now because I've been working on my relationships and I am a lot better at not having these thoughts anymore. Or if they show up, I don't react to them. And that's a beautiful thing that will happen to you. And I cannot wait for that to happen to you because it's almost like pressing a pause button. When you have a thought come up, oh, I wish he was different, or I wish he would do something. Right away, you notice that thought and you don't react to it. That you see it and you know that this thought doesn't produce good results for you. And you just see it, and you right away, because you see it, you stop. You don't react. You're like, oh, right, I see that. That's not useful. How can I accept what he's doing? How can I allow what he's doing with love and support? And if you can't do that with love and support, simply just like, how can I just let him be? I don't have to like what he's doing, but I don't have to fight him over this either, right? So I want you to report back to me. How is it going? Do you have any questions? Again, I would love to coach you on any of this. because it helps us to talk about our thoughts with somebody else outside of our brain. We get more awareness of our thoughts when we say them out loud, when we write them down, or when someone else points out, oh, hey, did you notice that what you just said is actually a thought? It is hugely beneficial to do this work with someone else, even if it's just like a friend who is listening, right? But it is a lot more efficient with a coach because we're trained to point out the thinking cycle to you. Oh, hey, did you notice that when you're thinking, he should be taking out the garbage, you feel frustrated, and then that frustration leads you to fight with him? Did you notice that? Right? What if you were feeling understanding that he doesn't want to take out the garbage, and you were willing to remind him to take out the garbage more times than you do? Then would you be showing up with him in a lot less fighting way, right? So as coaches, we do try to take you from one feeling and show you a road to another feeling where you are going to show up with more love and connection, right? And then at the end, it's up to you what you choose to think and feel and how you're going to choose to act. But it is my job to show you the options. So I invite you to sign up for a free session with me, completely free, where I can help you with anything you're struggling with. And if it is still unclear, please just email me at natalia@coachingnatalia.com, or do sign up for a session. You can go to my website, www.coachingnatalia.com, and go to sign up for a free mini session. And if you can't find the time that works for you, just email me and we can figure out the time that I can just see what else I have available. But I do think that I think this will be super helpful for you to really look at your thoughts, so you're thinking about you as a mom, your son, or the world around your son, or the past and the future. What are all those thoughts? And are they creating feelings of love and connection? Or are they frustration and anger and kind of pissed off, furious? Then of course you're going to be fighting with him, right? So take care of your own feelings first, and then then you will show up in a loving way by default, okay? All right, next episode I'm talking about boundaries and how you can set boundaries with your son from a loving, connected place, not from anger and fear and defensiveness. And that will be key, because you can still allow yourself to love your son, but set a boundary that works for you and that serves you in your life. All right? Okay, tune in for the part 4 next week, and I will see you next week. Bye.